The champagne glass shattered before Simone even realized she'd dropped it. Crystal shards scattered across the marble floor of the Preston Estate ballroom, and 200 heads turned toward her. Designers' gowns, diamond necklaces, eyes sharp as knives. But Simone barely noticed them. She was staring at the woman on stage. Victoria Ashford, blonde, porcelain-skinned, draped in a couture gown that cost more than most people's cars, stood at the microphone with her hand resting possessively on the arm of Simone's husband. Ex-husband, technically. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, but that wasn't what made Simone drop her glass. It was what Victoria said next. I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate the Preston Foundation's 50th anniversary, and I especially want to thank my fiancé, Richard Preston, for inviting me into this incredible family. Victoria's smile was radiant, poisonous. I know his previous marriage was difficult, but I promise to be the wife the Preston name deserves. The room went silent. Simone felt every eye land on her, felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed delight at watching her humiliation play out in real time. Richard didn't even look at her. He just smiled at Victoria and raised his glass. This was planned, Simone realized. He invited me here to watch this. Before we go on, make sure you're subscribed and share where you're watching from. Trust me, this story hits close to home. It could happen to anyone. 6 months ago, Simone Preston had been one of the most photographed women in New York, not because she was a socialite, not because she'd been born into wealth, but because she'd married Richard Preston, heir to a pharmaceutical empire worth $4.2 billion, and the tabloids couldn't get enough of the Cinderella story. Black girl from Brooklyn marries billionaire heir. From public school teacher to Preston wife. The new face of Preston Pharmaceuticals. They'd loved her for about 6 months. Then the cracks started showing. Not in her, in Richard. He'd been charming during the courtship, attentive, genuine, or so she'd thought. But after the wedding, after the cameras stopped flashing, after she'd moved into the Preston estate and signed the prenup his lawyers had prepared, everything changed. The family dinners where his mother, Catherine Preston, would ask when Simone planned to do something with her hair. The charity galas where Richard's friends would mistake her for staff. The business meetings where Richard would introduce her as my wife, but never by name. And then there was Victoria, Richard's college girlfriend, the woman he'd been supposed to marry, according to his mother, the woman who kept appearing at family events, at business dinners, at every place Simone was supposed to belong. She's just a friend, Richard would say. Stop being paranoid. But Simone had seen the texts. 6 months into the marriage, she'd seen everything. The affair had been going on since before the wedding. Mrs. Preston? Simone blinked. A server stood beside her, offering a towel for her hands. Blood mixed with champagne on her palm, she'd cut herself on the glass. I'm fine, Simone said automatically. But she wasn't fine. She was standing in a ballroom full of people who'd watched her marriage collapse, watched the divorce proceedings get dragged through every gossip column in the city, watched her get painted as the angry wife, the difficult one, the woman who just couldn't fit in. And now Richard had invited her here, to the annual Preston Foundation Gala, an event she'd helped plan for 2 years, to watch him announce his engagement to the woman he'd been cheating with. Why did I come? Because Richard's lawyer had called 3 days ago and said it was important that she attend, that there were final details about the divorce settlement that needed to be discussed in person. She should have known it was a trap. Simone, she turned. Catherine Preston stood there, immaculate in a silver gown, her face a mask of polite concern. I think it's best if you leave, Catherine said quietly. This is becoming a scene. I'm becoming a scene? Simone's voice was low, controlled. Your son just announced his engagement to his mistress in front of 200 people, and I'm the problem? My son moved on from a marriage that wasn't working. You should do the same. Catherine's eyes were ice. The car is waiting outside. I had Thomas bring it around. How considerate. I'm trying to spare you further embarrassment. No. You're trying to get rid of me before I ruin the optics. Simone stepped closer. But here's the thing, Catherine. I'm already ruined. You all made sure of that. So what exactly do I have to lose? Catherine's expression flickered. Just for a second. Fear, uncertainty, then it was gone. Good night, Simone. Catherine walked away, heels clicking on marble. Simone stood there, blood dripping from her hand, surrounded by whispers and stares. And then she heard it. A voice from near the stage. Victoria's voice, caught by a microphone that hadn't been turned off. God, I thought she'd never leave. Richard, darling, are you sure she signed the final papers? Simone went very still. She signed them, Richard's voice replied. Casual, amused. 3 months ago. The settlement was finalized last week. She got the brownstone in Brooklyn and $2 million. We kept everything else. Victoria laughed. $2 million for 3 years of marriage? That's barely minimum wage. Well, she did sign the prenup, and my lawyers made sure it was ironclad. Still, I almost feel bad for her. Don't. She knew what she was getting into. The microphone cut off. But Simone had heard enough. She walked through the ballroom in a daze. $2 million. The brownstone. That was it. Richard's fortune was worth over $4 billion. The divorce settlement gave her 0.05% of his wealth. The prenup. She'd signed it 3 days before the wedding. Richard's lawyers had presented it as standard procedure, protection for both parties. She'd been 26, in love, overwhelmed by the wedding planning. She hadn't read it carefully, hadn't hired her own lawyer. She'd trusted him. Stupid. So stupid. Simone pushed through the ballroom doors and stepped into the marble hallway. Her heels echoed in the silence. Portraits of Preston ancestors lined the walls, generations of wealth, power, and privilege staring down at her. She'd never belonged here. They'd made sure she knew it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Maya. Girl, tell me you didn't go to that gala. Tell me you stayed home and drank wine like a sane person. Simone almost laughed. Almost. She started to type a response and walked directly into someone. I'm sorry, She looked up. A man stood in the hallway. Late 30s, wearing a server's uniform but with an expensive watch that didn't match. Dark skin, sharp eyes, and a face that was somehow familiar. You're Simone Preston, he said. Not anymore, just Simone. Right. The divorce. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Congratulations on your escape. Escape? Simone laughed bitterly. I got $2 million and a brownstone. Richard kept billions. Some escape. Actually, the man pulled an envelope from his jacket. You might want to reconsider that assessment. He handed her the envelope. Simone stared at it. What is this? Open it. She did. Inside was a single sheet of paper, legal letterhead, and at the bottom, Richard Preston's signature. But it wasn't divorce papers. It was a contract, dated 4 years ago, 6 months before she'd met Richard. Her eyes scanned the document, not understanding. Something about partnership agreements and profit sharing and intellectual property rights. I don't understand, she said. That's a contract your husband signed with a biotech startup called Helix Innovations, the man explained. 4 years ago, Preston Pharmaceuticals was struggling. Richard needed a breakthrough, so he partnered with Helix, a small company founded by a brilliant scientist named Dr. James Cooper. Okay, but what does this have to do with... Dr. Cooper is my brother, and Richard Preston stole his research. Simone's breath caught. The breakthrough drug that saved Preston Pharmaceuticals? The one that made Richard a billionaire? The man's voice was quiet, cold. It was my brother's formula. Richard partnered with him, got access to the research, then cut him out. Filed patents under Preston Pharmaceuticals. My brother spent everything fighting the lawsuit. He lost. Died of a heart attack 2 years later. I'm sorry, Simone whispered. But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Look at the date on that contract. Simone looked. 4 years ago. Now look at your marriage license, the man said. What's the date? 3 years ago. So? The man leaned closer. That contract was signed before you were married, which means any assets generated from it fall under marital property, not prenup protection. Simone's heart stopped. You're saying... I'm saying the drug that made Richard a billionaire was developed during your marriage, using intellectual property that predates your prenup. The man smiled. It was sharp and dangerous, which means you're entitled to half of everything it generated. Not $2 million, Mrs. Preston. $2 billion. The envelope slipped from Simone's fingers. Who are you? She whispered. Marcus Cooper, attorney, and someone who's been waiting 3 years for the right moment to destroy Richard Preston. His eyes glittered. Congratulations, Mrs. Preston. You just became his worst nightmare. Simone stood in the hallway, mind reeling. $2 billion. Half of everything. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I want Richard to lose everything he stole. His money, his reputation, his freedom. Marcus picked up the envelope and handed it back to her. And you're the only person who can make that happen. I can't. This is insane. Is it? Or is it justice? Simone thought about the humiliation, the affair, the prenup that had been designed to trap her, the $2 million Richard thought was generous. She thought about Victoria on that stage, laughing about minimum wage. She thought about Richard's voice. She knew what she was getting into. What do I have to do? Simone asked. Marcus smiled. Walk back into that ballroom. Smile. Congratulate Richard and Victoria. And tomorrow morning, we file the lawsuit that destroys everything he's built. He'll fight back. Of course he will. Richard Preston doesn't lose quietly. But here's the beautiful thing. Marcus showed her another document. I have 3 years of evidence, financial records, emails, depositions from former Helix employees, everything proving Richard stole my brother's work. And if we go public with this, Preston Pharmaceuticals collapses. The board votes Richard out. The SEC investigates. And you, Marcus looked at her, you walk away with half of everything he stole. Simone stared at the envelope in her hands. She could walk away, get in the car Catherine had called, go back to her brownstone, accept her $2 million and her humiliation and her defeat. Or she could walk back into that ballroom, play the game, and burn Richard Preston's world to the ground. How do I know I can trust you? She asked. You don't. But ask yourself, what do you have to lose that Richard hasn't already taken? Simone looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, at her torn dress, her bleeding hand, her smudged makeup. She looked like a woman who'd been destroyed. Good. Let them think that. Give me 5 minutes, she said. Then meet me in the East Wing Library and bring every piece of evidence you have. Marcus nodded. What are you going to do? Simone smiled. It was cold and sharp and nothing like the woman who'd dropped a champagne glass 20 minutes ago. I'm going to give Richard exactly what he wants. A perfect end to a perfect evening. She straightened her dress. And then, I'm going to take everything. She walked back toward the ballroom. Behind her, Marcus Cooper watched and smiled. This was going to be fun. Richard stood on stage, Victoria at his side, basking in applause. The doors opened. Simone walked in. The room went quiet. She crossed the ballroom floor, heels clicking, blood still staining her palm. Every eye followed her. Whispers erupted. She stopped in front of the stage and looked up at Richard. "Congratulations," she said clearly, "on your engagement." Richard's smile was patronizing. "Thank you, Simone, that's very mature of you. And thank you for the settlement, for the brownstone, for being so generous." Victoria smirked. "You deserve it," Richard said. "After everything." "I do, don't I?" Simone's smile widened. "See you in court, Richard." She turned and walked out. Richard's smile faltered. What? But Simone was already gone. And in the East Wing library, Marcus Cooper was spreading 3 years of evidence across a mahogany table. The war had just begun, and this time, Richard Preston was going to lose everything. Simone didn't sleep that night. She sat in the East Wing library until 4 a.m., surrounded by documents that made her sick to her stomach. Financial records, emails, patent filings. And at the center of it all, the story of Dr. James Cooper, a brilliant scientist who'd trusted the wrong person. "He was 29 when he developed the formula," Marcus said, sliding another folder across the table. "Younger than Richard. Smarter. But he didn't have connections, didn't have money. So when Preston Pharmaceuticals offered to partner with him, he thought it was his dream coming true." Simone opened the folder. Inside was a photo of James Cooper, a black man with kind eyes and her brother's same sharp jawline. He was holding a trophy, grinning at the camera. "This was taken at a medical innovation conference," Marcus continued, 3 months before Richard stole everything. James had just presented his preliminary findings. The pharmaceutical world was buzzing. Everyone wanted to partner with him. But he chose Richard. Richard made promises, full partnership, equal profit sharing, credit for the research. Marcus's voice went flat. James signed the contract in good faith, gave Preston Pharmaceuticals access to his lab, his data, his 5 years of work. And 6 months later, Richard filed patents under Preston Pharma's name alone. How is that legal? It's not. But Richard's lawyers buried James in litigation, tied up his money, destroyed his credibility, leaked stories to the press about disgruntled former employees and unfounded claims. Marcus pulled out newspaper clippings. Headlines screamed, "Scientist claims theft. Experts say otherwise." Preston Pharmaceuticals, victim of fraud attempt. Simone felt bile rise in her throat. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "I know." Marcus's eyes softened slightly. "You weren't part of this. You met Richard after the theft, after the lawsuits. You were just another piece on his chessboard." "What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated. Then he pulled out another document. It was an internal memo from Preston Pharmaceuticals' PR team, dated 3 months before Simone had met Richard. Memo. Image Rehabilitation Strategy. To Richard Preston. From Sarah Chen, VP Communications. Public perception issues following Cooper lawsuit. Richard, the Cooper situation has damaged our image, particularly among minority communities and young professionals. Recommend strategic relationship with high-profile person of color to counter negative press. Ideal candidate, educated, accomplished, but not from our social circle. Someone who makes Preston Pharma appear inclusive and progressive. Timeline, 6 to 12 months. Simone's hands shook. This is a joke. Tell me this is a joke. I wish it was. Marcus watched her carefully. 3 months after that memo, Richard accidentally attended a charity fundraiser at your school, where you were the featured speaker, where he asked you to coffee. The room tilted. Our entire relationship was strategy. You were smart, beautiful, accomplished, and black. You made Richard look good, made Preston Pharmaceuticals look progressive, made people forget about James Cooper. Marcus leaned back. And the moment you stopped being useful, the moment the PR value wore off, he moved on to Victoria, someone who actually belongs in his world. Simone stood abruptly. The chair clattered backward. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 3 years. 3 years of her life. The late nights when Richard worked and she ate dinner alone. The family gatherings where Catherine made pointed comments about her hair, her clothes, her background. The charity galas where she smiled and posed and played the role of the perfect wife while Richard texted Victoria in the bathroom. None of it had been real. She'd been a prop, a PR move, a box to check. I'm going to destroy him, Simone said quietly. Marcus smiled. Good. Because I brought the matches, you just need to light the fire. The lawsuit was filed at 9 a.m. the next morning. Simone Preston v. Richard Preston and Preston Pharmaceuticals. Grounds: fraudulent misrepresentation of marital assets, theft of intellectual property, violation of partnership agreements. Damages sought: $2.1 billion plus punitive damages. By 9:15 a.m., Richard's phone was exploding. By 9:30 a.m., Preston Pharmaceuticals' stock had dropped 8%. By 10 a.m., every major news outlet in the country was running the story. Billionaire's ex-wife claims he stole fortune. Preston Pharma empire built on stolen research. Black scientist's family joins explosive lawsuit. Simone sat in Marcus's law office in downtown Brooklyn, deliberately chosen because it was nowhere near Richard's world, and watched the news coverage on 3 screens simultaneously. Her phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. She let it ring. It rang again, and again, and again. Finally, Marcus gestured. Answer it. Let him show his hand. Simone picked up. Put it on speaker. What the hell is this? Richard's voice was pure rage. $2 billion? Theft? Are you insane? Good morning to you too, Richard. You signed the prenup. You agreed to the settlement. This is fraud, Simone. My lawyers will bury you. Actually, your prenup only covered assets you had before our marriage. The drug that made you a billionaire was developed during our marriage using stolen research, which makes it marital property. Simone's voice was ice. I'm entitled to half. You're entitled to nothing. You were a school teacher who got lucky. I gave you everything. No, you used me. For PR, for optics. To make yourself look like less of a monster after you destroyed James Cooper. Simone leaned forward. I have the memo, Richard. The one where your PR team recommended you find a high-profile person of color to rehabilitate your image. I have everything. Silence. Then, who told you about that? Does it matter? Marcus Cooper. Richard's voice changed, became calculated. You're working with James's brother, the man who's been trying to destroy me for 3 years. Simone, he's using you, like you used me? This is different. Marcus Cooper is a con artist, a bitter man who can't accept that his brother lost fair and square. His brother died of a heart attack at 33 because you stole 5 years of his work and destroyed his life. Simone's voice cracked. Don't you feel anything? Any guilt? Any remorse? I feel sorry that you're being manipulated. Richard's tone softened, the same tone he'd used when they were dating, when he was playing the role of the charming suitor. Simone, sweetheart, think about this. You're throwing away a clean break for a lawsuit you can't win. My lawyers are the best in the country. They'll drag this out for years. They'll destroy your reputation. You already did that. They'll paint you as a gold digger, an opportunist, someone who married me for money and now wants more. Let them. Simone stood. Because I have something your lawyers don't. What's that? The truth. And Richard? The truth makes a hell of a headline. She hung up. Marcus was grinning. That was perfect. That was terrifying. Simone's hands shook. She pressed them flat against the desk. He's going to come after me with everything. Yes, he is. Marcus pulled up a new document on his laptop. Which is why we need to move fast. We file for an injunction today. Freeze Preston Pharmaceuticals' assets until the case is resolved. We leak James's original research to the press, show the world what Richard stole, and we find allies. What allies? Richard owns half of Manhattan. The Prestons have been powerful for 3 generations. But they've also made enemies. Marcus turned the laptop toward her. On screen was a list of names. Former employees Richard screwed over. Competitors Preston Pharma crushed. Investors who got pushed out. Journalists who've been trying to expose Preston corruption for years. He smiled. Richard thinks he's untouchable. But empires built on lies collapse fast once the foundation cracks. Simone looked at the list. Dozens of names, dozens of people who'd been hurt by Richard Preston. This is going to get ugly, she said. It already is ugly. We're just exposing it. By noon, the press was camped outside Simone's brownstone in Brooklyn. She watched them from her second-floor window. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions at anyone who walked by. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Texts from old friends, former colleagues, people she hadn't heard from in years, all suddenly interested in her story. Maya showed up at 1 p.m. with Thai food and wine. Okay, I know I said you should have stayed home last night, Maya said, unpacking containers on Simone's kitchen counter. But damn, girl, you really went for the jugular. I should have done it 3 months ago. You should have done it 3 years ago. The moment you saw those texts from Victoria. Maya poured wine into 2 glasses. But better late than never. So, how bad is it? Richard called me 17 times this morning. Catherine left a voicemail calling me vindictive and delusional. Victoria posted on Instagram about women who can't move on. And Preston Pharmaceuticals issued a statement calling my lawsuit frivolous and without merit. Classic. Attack the victim, protect the empire. Maya raised her glass. But you know what? You have something they don't. What? People actually like you. You're the teacher who married a billionaire and got screwed. They're the dynasty built on stolen work and affairs. Trust me, public opinion is on your side. Simone's phone buzzed. An email from Marcus. Motion for injunction filed. Hearing scheduled for Monday. Also, check the news. Someone leaked James's original research. Simone pulled up her laptop. The headline was everywhere. Stolen genius. Original research proves Preston's billion-dollar drug was not his own. The article included side-by-side comparisons. James Cooper's original formulas. The patents Richard had filed 6 months later. They were identical. Oh my God, Maya whispered, reading over her shoulder. This is proof. The comments section was exploding. Thousands of people sharing the article, expressing outrage, demanding accountability. Preston Pharmaceuticals stock dropped another 12%. And then Simone's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Mrs. Preston? A woman's voice, nervous. My name is Dr. Lisa Chen. I worked at Preston Pharmaceuticals 5 years ago. I was in the lab when Richard first brought in James Cooper's research. Simone's heart stopped. You were there? Yes. And I saw everything. How Richard promised James partnership, then locked him out of his own lab. How he altered the patent applications to remove James's name. How he threatened anyone who questioned it. Dr. Chen's voice shook. I wanted to speak up at the time, but I had student loans and Richard said he'd make sure I never worked in pharmaceuticals again. So I stayed quiet. And I've regretted it every day since. Why are you calling now? Because I saw the news. I saw what you're doing. And I realized I can't stay quiet anymore. Dr. Chen took a breath. I kept copies of everything. Lab notes, emails, voice recordings of Richard discussing how to handle the James Cooper situation. If you want them, they're yours. Simone looked at Maya, who was staring wide-eyed. Dr. Chen, if you testify, Richard will come after you. I know, but some things are more important than career safety. James Cooper died because no one stood up for him. I won't let that happen again. Tears burned Simone's eyes. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to fight. Monday morning, Simone walked into Manhattan Supreme Court wearing a navy suit and her mother's pearl earrings. The courthouse steps were packed with press. Cameras flashed as she climbed the stairs with Marcus at her side. Reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Preston, do you really think you can win? Is this about money or revenge? How does it feel to go against one of New York's most powerful families? Simone kept her head high and didn't answer. Inside, the courtroom was already full. Spectators filled every seat. And at the defendant's table sat Richard Preston, flanked by 4 lawyers in $1,000 suits. He looked calm, confident. He looked like a man who'd never lost anything in his life. Their eyes met across the room. Richard smiled, mouthed, "You'll lose." Simone smiled back, mouthed, "Watch me." The judge entered. All rise. The hearing began. Richard's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Gerald Whitmore, stood first. Your Honor, this lawsuit is nothing more than a desperate attempt by a bitter ex-wife to extort money from my client. Mrs. Preston signed a prenuptial agreement. She accepted a generous settlement. This case should be dismissed immediately. Your Honor, Marcus stood. Mrs. Preston's prenup explicitly covered only assets Mr. Preston possessed before their marriage. The drug in question, Helix 9, which generated $3.7 billion in revenue, was developed during their marriage using intellectual property stolen from Dr. James Cooper. Alleged theft, Whitmore interrupted. These accusations were litigated 3 years ago and buried under mountains of legal maneuvering and suppressed evidence. Marcus pulled out a file. We have new testimony from Dr. Lisa Chen, a former Preston Pharmaceuticals employee who witnessed the theft firsthand. We have James Cooper's original research, which proves the patents filed by Preston Pharma are identical to Dr. Cooper's work. And we have internal memos showing Richard Preston deliberately targeted Mrs. Preston as a PR strategy following negative publicity from the Cooper lawsuit. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised his hand. Mr. Cooper, do you have this evidence? Yes, Your Honor. We've submitted everything to the court. Whitmore stood quickly. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. Dr. Chen is a disgruntled former employee. The memos are taken out of context. Then you'll have opportunity to refute them at trial, the judge said. But based on the preliminary evidence, I'm granting the plaintiff's motion for an injunction. Preston Pharmaceuticals' assets related to Helix 9 are frozen pending resolution of this case. The courtroom erupted. Richard's face went white. Your Honor, this will devastate the company, Whitmore sputtered. Then your client should have been more careful about whose work he claimed as his own. The judge banged his gavel. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing. Court dismissed. Simone stood on shaking legs. Marcus grabbed her arm to steady her. They'd won. The first battle, at least. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed, but this time Simone stopped at the microphones. I'm not doing this for revenge, she said clearly. I'm doing this for James Cooper, who died without seeing justice. I'm doing this for everyone Richard Preston has used and discarded. And I'm doing this because powerful men need to learn they can't steal people's lives and walk away clean. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted follow-up questions, but Simone was already walking away, Marcus at her side. "That was perfect," Marcus said. "That was just the beginning," Simone replied, because she knew Richard Preston, and she knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. That night, someone tried to break into Simone's brownstone. She woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of shattering glass, grabbed her phone, dialed 911. "Someone's breaking in," she whispered. 1247 Maple Street, Brooklyn." Footsteps on her stairs. Simone grabbed the baseball bat she kept beside her bed, a habit from her childhood in Brooklyn, and pressed herself against the wall. The footsteps stopped outside her bedroom door. The doorknob turned slowly. Simone raised the bat, heart hammering. The door burst open. A man in a ski mask rushed in. Simone swung. The bat connected with his shoulder. He stumbled, cursed, lunged at her. She screamed and swung again. This time she hit his knee. He went down. Sirens wailed outside. The man scrambled to his feet and ran. Police arrived 3 minutes later, found the broken window, the disturbed lock, but the intruder was gone. "Did you see his face?" the officer asked. "No, he wore a mask." Simone sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, shaking. "But I know who sent him." "Ma'am, you can't make accusations without evidence. My ex-husband is a billionaire who just had his assets frozen because of my lawsuit. This happens 12 hours after I won in court." She looked at the officer. "You do the math." The officer sighed. "We'll file a report. But unless we catch the intruder, there's nothing you can do." "I know." After the police left, Simone called Marcus. "I'm coming over," he said immediately. "It's 4 a.m. "I don't care. You can't stay there alone. Not after this." 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived with 2 things, a locksmith and a security system installer. By dawn, Simone's brownstone had reinforced locks, cameras, and motion sensors. "This is insane," she said, watching the installers work. "I'm in a war with a billionaire, and I'm fighting from a Brooklyn brownstone with a baseball bat." "Hey, you landed a solid hit." Marcus smiled. "But yeah, we need to move you somewhere safer. I have a friend with a secure apartment in—" "No." Simone's voice was firm. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding. This is my home. Richard doesn't get to chase me out of it." "Simone, if I run, I lose. Not just the lawsuit, everything. My dignity, my strength, the message I'm trying to send." She met his eyes. "I stay, and I fight." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay. But I'm staying too, at least until trial. I'll sleep on your couch. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Because you're not just my client anymore." His voice softened. "You're my brother's justice, and I'm not letting anything happen to you." The next 30 days were hell. Richard's lawyers filed motion after motion, demanded Simone's financial records, subpoenaed her friends, her former colleagues, anyone who'd ever known her. They leaked stories to tabloids. Gold digger ex-wife destroys husband's company. Bitter woman's revenge plot. Preston family victim of elaborate fraud. Victoria gave an exclusive interview to Vogue. "It's heartbreaking to watch Richard suffer because his ex-wife can't accept that their marriage is over. I just hope she finds peace." Catherine Preston appeared on morning television. "My son gave Simone opportunities she never would have had otherwise. This is how she repays him." The attacks were relentless, coordinated, designed to destroy Simone's credibility before trial. But something unexpected happened. People fought back. Former students posted about Simone online, about how she'd stayed late to tutor them, how she'd used her own money to buy classroom supplies, how she'd believed in them when no one else did. Teachers' unions rallied behind her, women's groups, organizations fighting corporate corruption. The narrative began to shift. Simone wasn't a gold digger. She was a teacher who'd been used by a billionaire and was fighting back. And Richard Preston wasn't a victim. He was a thief hiding behind money and power. By the time the trial started, public opinion had turned decisively in Simone's favor, which made Richard even more dangerous. The morning of the trial, Simone received an envelope. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Simone and Marcus sitting in her kitchen late at night working on the case. The angle suggested it had been taken from outside, through her window. On the back, someone had written, "Drop the lawsuit, or everyone you love gets hurt." Simone's hands shook. Marcus saw it. His face went hard. "We're calling the police." "They can't do anything. No evidence, no case." "Then we postpone the trial." "No." Simone crumpled the photo. "That's what Richard wants. He wants me scared. He wants me to run. But I'm done running." She grabbed her bag. "Let's go destroy him." Marcus smiled. "That's what I like to hear." They walked into the courthouse together. Richard sat at the defense table, perfectly composed, surrounded by his army of lawyers. But for the first time, Simone saw something in his eyes. Fear. Because Richard Preston had spent his entire life winning, buying his way out of problems, using power to crush anyone who challenged him. But now he was in a courtroom, where money couldn't buy the verdict, where the truth actually mattered, and the truth was about to tear him apart. The judge entered. "All rise." The trial began, and Simone Preston prepared to take back everything Richard had stolen. Not just her money, her dignity, her truth, her life. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Cameras lined the back wall. The judge had allowed limited media access given the public interest. Simone could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, hands folded. Across the aisle, Richard looked calm. Too calm. That's when Simone knew he had something planned. Gerald Whitmore stood for his opening statement. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. Simone Preston is a woman scorned. She married my client knowing exactly what the prenuptial agreement entailed. When the marriage ended, she received a generous settlement, $2 million and a valuable property. But it wasn't enough." Whitmore paced slowly, deliberately. So she invented a story. With the help of Marcus Cooper, a man who's been trying to destroy my client for years, she concocted allegations of theft, conspiracy, and fraud, all to extort billions from a man whose only crime was falling out of love with her. Murmurs from the gallery. Simone kept her face neutral. "We will prove that Preston Pharmaceuticals developed Helix 9 through legitimate research. That Dr. James Cooper was a troubled employee who made unfounded accusations when his partnership didn't work out. And that Mrs. Preston signed away her rights to any claims against my client's fortune 3 years ago." Whitmore turned to the jury. "Don't let bitterness and greed masquerade as justice." He sat down. Marcus stood, straightened his tie. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but powerful. "Your Honor, members of the jury, Gerald Whitmore just told you this case is simple. He's right, but not in the way he thinks." Marcus walked to the jury box. "This is simple because the evidence is overwhelming. Richard Preston stole 5 years of research from my brother, Dr. James Cooper. He filed patents under his own name. He made billions from another man's genius. And when my brother tried to fight back, Richard Preston destroyed him." Marcus pulled out a document. "This is James Cooper's original research journal, dated 4 years ago. Every formula, every breakthrough, documented in his own hand." He held up another paper. This is the patent Richard Preston filed 6 months later. Identical, not similar. Identical. He let that sink in. Richard Preston built an empire on stolen work, and when he needed to rehabilitate his image after the scandal, he used Simone Preston, a bright, accomplished woman, as a prop. Married her for optics. Discarded her when she was no longer useful. And now he wants you to believe she's the villain. Marcus returned to the table. By the end of this trial, you'll know the truth. And the truth is this: Richard Preston is a thief, and thieves don't get to keep what they stole. The first witness was Dr. Lisa Chen. She took the stand in a gray suit, visibly nervous. Marcus approached gently. Dr. Chen, can you tell the court about your employment at Preston Pharmaceuticals? I worked there for 3 years as a research biochemist. I was assigned to the Helix 9 development team. And were you present when Dr. James Cooper first partnered with Preston Pharmaceuticals? Yes. James came in so excited. He'd been working on this formula for 5 years. Mr. Preston promised him full partnership, equal credit, profit sharing. Her voice wavered. James trusted him. What happened after Dr. Cooper shared his research? Richard, Mr. Preston, locked James out of his own lab, said there were security concerns. Then he had his team replicate James's work, file patents under Preston Pharma's name, and when James objected, she paused. Mr. Preston threatened to destroy him if he went public. Did you witness this threat? Yes, I was in the lab. Mr. Preston said. Dr. Chen's voice dropped. He said, "You're a nobody from nowhere. I'm a Preston. Who do you think people will believe?" The courtroom was silent. Whitmore stood for cross-examination. Dr. Chen, you were fired from Preston Pharmaceuticals, weren't you? I resigned. After receiving a negative performance review? I resigned because I couldn't watch what was happening to James anymore. Or because you were about to be terminated for poor performance and decided to quit first? Whitmore smiled coldly. Isn't it true you've harbored resentment toward my client for years? That this testimony is revenge, not truth? No. This testimony is guilt. Dr. Chen's eyes filled with tears. I should have spoken up 3 years ago. I should have stood with James. Instead, I stayed silent because I was afraid, and James died thinking no one believed him. She looked directly at the jury. I'm not letting Richard Preston get away with this anymore. Whitmore sat down, frustrated. The prosecution called witness after witness. Former Helix Innovations employees who testified about James Cooper's groundbreaking research. Patent experts who proved the formulas were identical. Financial analysts who showed how Preston Pharmaceuticals had gone from struggling to dominant after acquiring James's work. Each testimony built the case brick by brick, but Richard's team wasn't done. On day 3, Whitmore called Victoria Ashford to the stand. She wore a cream Chanel suit and looked like innocence personified. Ms. Ashford, Whitmore began, how long have you known Richard Preston? Since college. We dated for 2 years before he met Simone. And when did your relationship resume? About a year into Richard's marriage, but it wasn't... Victoria paused delicately. It wasn't my intention to hurt anyone. Richard was miserable. His marriage was falling apart. Simone was cold, distant, always accusing him of things he hadn't done. He needed someone who understood him. Simone's nails dug into her palms. Did Simone know about the prenuptial agreement before she signed it? Oh, yes. Richard's lawyers went over every detail with her. She knew exactly what she was agreeing to. Victoria's voice dripped with false sympathy. I think she believed she could change his mind later, make him feel guilty enough to give her more. When that didn't work, she invented this lawsuit. Marcus stood for cross-examination. His smile was sharp. Ms. Ashford, you said Richard was miserable in his marriage, but you were also having an affair with him throughout that marriage, correct? I wouldn't call it an affair. What would you call it? Friendship with benefits? Marcus pulled out documents. These are hotel receipts. 23 different hotels over 2 years, all charged to Richard's credit card, all rooms booked for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He looked at her. That's you and Richard, isn't it? Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Richard needed companionship. While married to my client. Yes, we've established that. Marcus pulled out more papers. And this is a text message you sent to Richard 6 months before he filed for divorce. Would you read it for the court? Victoria's face paled. I don't... Allow me. Marcus read, When are you finally going to dump the charity case? Your mother is right. She doesn't belong in your world. Just pay her off and be done with it. He lowered the paper. Interesting choice of words. Charity case. Is that how you viewed Mrs. Preston? As someone beneath Richard? I didn't mean. You also texted, $2 million is generous for someone who contributed nothing. Yet Mrs. Preston was a successful teacher before she met Richard. She had her own career, her own life. What exactly did she contribute nothing to? To Richard's world. To the Preston legacy. Ah, so unless someone is born into wealth, they have no value. Is that your testimony? Whitmore objected. The judge sustained it. But the damage was done. The jury had seen Victoria's true nature. On day 5, Richard Preston took the stand. He looked composed, confident. Every inch the successful billionaire. Whitmore led him through the timeline. The partnership with James Cooper, the development of Helix 9, the patents. Dr. Cooper was brilliant, Richard said smoothly, but he was also unstable, paranoid. He became convinced that Preston Pharmaceuticals was stealing from him when in reality we were collaborating. When the partnership ended poorly, he made accusations rather than accept responsibility. And your marriage to Simone Preston? I loved her, truly. But we were incompatible. She wanted a simple life. I have responsibilities, a company to run, a legacy to uphold. When the marriage ended, I tried to be fair. $2 million is more than most people see in a lifetime. Did you marry her as a PR strategy? Absolutely not. That memo... Richard shook his head sadly. Was taken completely out of context. My PR team suggests strategies all the time. I don't follow most of them. I married Simone because I fell in love with an intelligent, passionate woman. The fact that our marriage didn't work out doesn't make it a conspiracy. He was good. Simone had to admit that. Smooth, sympathetic, almost believable. Then Marcus stood for cross-examination. Mr. Preston, you testified that you loved your wife, yet you had an affair throughout your marriage. That was a mistake. I regret it. Do you? Because you're now engaged to the woman you cheated with. Marcus pulled out the PR memo. And this memo, you claim it was taken out of context. Can you explain the context where recommending your team find you a high-profile person of color to rehabilitate your image is not a calculated PR move? It was just, my team throws out ideas. Yes or no, Mr. Preston? Did you meet Simone 3 months after this memo was written? Richard hesitated. Yes. At a charity event your company sponsored? Yes. An event you don't normally attend? It was important to the company. And you married her 11 months later, exactly within the 6 to 12-month timeline your PR team recommended. Marcus pulled out another document. This is an internal report from Preston Pharmaceuticals showing how your approval ratings improved 32% among minority communities and young professionals after your marriage to Simone. That's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Correlation isn't causation. No, but pattern is evidence. Marcus stepped closer. You used Simone Preston to fix your image after destroying James Cooper, and when she was no longer useful, you discarded her with a prenup designed to keep her from claiming what she was legally entitled to. I did nothing illegal. No, you did something worse. You built an empire on another man's work, then used your wife as a shield against criticism, and now you want this jury to believe you're the victim. Marcus returned to his seat. No further questions. The closing arguments came on day 7. Whitmore spoke first. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard testimony from bitter former employees, a vindictive ex-wife, and a brother seeking revenge. But you haven't heard evidence of theft. You've heard interpretations, assumptions, conspiracy theories dressed up as facts. He paused. Richard Preston is not perfect. He had an affair. His marriage failed. But those are personal failings, not crimes. And they don't entitle Simone Preston to billions of dollars that legally belong to Preston Pharmaceuticals. Marcus stood for his closing. Mr. Whitmore is right about one thing. Richard Preston is not perfect. But this case isn't about perfection. It's about theft. Marcus walked to the jury. James Cooper created something revolutionary. Richard Preston stole it, profited from it, and destroyed the man who created it. The evidence is overwhelming. The formulas are identical. The timeline is damning. The witnesses are credible. He held up James Cooper's research journal. This is a man's life work, his legacy, his dream. Richard Preston took it, put his name on it, and made billions. And when he married Simone Preston, those billions became marital assets. Assets she is legally entitled to half of. Marcus's voice dropped. James Cooper died believing he'd failed, that no one would ever know the truth. But today, you can change that. You can give him justice. You can tell Simone Preston that she matters, that being used and discarded by a powerful man doesn't mean she has no rights. He looked each juror in the eye. You can tell Richard Preston that money and power don't put you above the law. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Simone barely slept, barely ate. She stayed in her brownstone with Marcus, watching the news coverage, reading the commentary, waiting. Maya brought food. Former students sent messages of support. The world waited. On the 3rd day, the jury sent word. They'd reached a verdict. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Simone sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. Whatever happens, he whispered, you fought. That matters. The jury filed in, 12 faces, unreadable. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The forewoman stood. We have, Your Honor. In the matter of Simone Preston versus Richard Preston and Preston Pharmaceuticals, on the charge of fraudulent misrepresentation of marital assets, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. The courtroom erupted. Simone's breath left her lungs. Marcus grabbed her hand. The judge banged his gavel. Order! We're not finished! The forewoman continued. On the charge of theft of intellectual property, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Richard's face went white. On the matter of damages, we award Simone Preston 50% of all profits generated by Helix 9 and its derivatives. Additionally, we award punitive damages of $500 million for deliberate fraud and emotional harm. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Spectators cheered. Richard's lawyers surrounded him, talking frantically. Simone sat frozen, barely able to process what she'd heard. She'd won. $2.1 billion plus $500 million in punitive damages. She'd won. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Simone stood at the microphone with Marcus beside her. For a moment, she just looked at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd supported her, doubted her, attacked her, believed in her. Then she spoke. This verdict isn't just for me. It's for James Cooper, who died without seeing justice. It's for everyone who's been used by people in power and told their pain doesn't matter. It's for every woman who's been called bitter or vindictive for demanding what she's owed. Her voice strengthened. Richard Preston spent 3 years trying to silence me, trying to make me believe I was worth $2 million and a brownstone. But I'm worth exactly what the law says I'm worth, half of everything we built together, even if he did the building with stolen materials. Reporters shouted questions. Simone answered a few, then stepped away. Marcus walked her to a waiting car. How do you feel? Terrified, exhausted, triumphant. She laughed shakily. Ask me again in a week when this feels real. It's real. You just took down a dynasty. We took down a dynasty. Simone looked at him. James would be proud of you. Marcus's eyes filled. I hope so. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Preston Pharmaceuticals' stock collapsed. The board voted Richard out as CEO within a week. Catherine Preston issued a statement disowning her son. Victoria broke off the engagement and sold her story to People magazine. Richard Preston filed for bankruptcy. The man who'd once been worth $4.2 billion now owned nothing. His assets seized, his reputation destroyed, his empire scattered like ashes. Simone watched it all from her brownstone in Brooklyn. She felt no joy in his destruction, no satisfaction in his pain, just closure. The money would take months to transfer, legal processes, financial restructuring. But it was coming. $2.6 billion, enough to never work again, enough to help every student she'd ever taught, enough to fund scholarships, foundations, research grants in James Cooper's name. Enough to build something real from the ruins of Richard's lies. 3 months later, Simone stood in front of a newly opened building in Brooklyn, the James Cooper Center for Scientific Innovation, a research facility for brilliant scientists without connections, without money, without access to the systems that had shut James out. Marcus stood beside her at the ribbon cutting. He would have loved this. I know. Simone cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. But this time, they were documenting something beautiful. Something true. Inside, the first class of Cooper Fellows waited. 20 young scientists who'd been given full funding, lab space, and support to pursue their research. No strings attached. No companies stealing their work. Simone addressed them. James Cooper created something revolutionary, and someone stole it from him. This center exists to make sure that never happens again. Your work is yours. Your discoveries are yours. And no one, no matter how powerful, can take that from you. The fellows applauded. Afterward, Simone walked through the building with Maya. So what now? Maya asked. You're officially a billionaire. You could retire, travel the world, buy an island. I'm going back to teaching. Maya stopped walking. What? Not full time, but I miss it. I miss helping students. I miss feeling useful. Simone smiled. Money doesn't define me, Maya. It never did. Richard tried to make me believe my worth was tied to his world, his wealth, his approval. But he was wrong. You're going to teach at a public school? With $2.6 billion in the bank? Why not? I'll just be the richest teacher in New York. Simone laughed. Besides, someone needs to show these kids that you can fight back against people who try to use you, and win. 6 months after the verdict, Simone received a letter. It was from Richard Preston. She almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Simone, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know, I'm sorry. For using you. For hurting you. For being so blinded by ambition that I forgot what it meant to be human. I've lost everything. my company, my family, my reputation. And I deserve to lose it. Not because of the lawsuit, but because of what I did to earn those things in the first place. James Cooper was brilliant. He trusted me, and I destroyed him. You loved me, and I betrayed you. I built an empire on stolen work and broken people, and I told myself it was success. I know this doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know you were right about everything. I hope you find peace. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Richard Simone folded the letter slowly. She thought about forgiveness, about whether Richard deserved it, about whether forgiving him would free her or trap her. In the end, she decided forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for her. She wrote back a single line. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. She mailed it and never thought about Richard Preston again. 1 year later, Simone stood in her classroom at Jefferson High School in Brooklyn. It was smaller than the Preston estate, less glamorous than the galas she'd attended, but it was hers. On the wall hung a photo of Dr. James Cooper in his lab, smiling. 25 students filled the desks, eager and bright and full of potential. Okay, Simone said, picking up a piece of chalk. Today we're talking about biochemistry, specifically, how one formula can change the world. Let me tell you a story about a brilliant scientist named James Cooper. She taught. She laughed. She answered questions and challenged assumptions and reminded her students that they mattered. When the bell rang, the students filed out. One girl lingered, a black teenager with curious eyes. Ms. Preston? She asked. Is it true you used to be married to a billionaire? Simone smiled. Yes. And you gave it up to teach here? I didn't give it up. I chose something better. The girl looked confused. What's better than being a billionaire? Simone thought about Richard, alone and broken. About Victoria, selling her story for relevance. About Catherine, clinging to a family legacy built on lies. Then she looked at her classroom, at the photo of James Cooper, at the center bearing his name where young scientists were changing the world. Being yourself, Simone said simply. That's better than any amount of money. The girl nodded slowly, processing this. Miss Preston, can I ask you something else? Of course. If you could go back and change everything, never meet him, never marry him, would you? Simone considered this. The pain, the humiliation, the 3 years of her life spent as someone's prop, but also the lawsuit, the victory, the justice for James Cooper, the center, the scholarships, the proof that powerful men could be held accountable. No, she said finally, I wouldn't change it, because it made me who I am, and I like who I am. The girl smiled. Me too, Ms. Preston. You're kind of amazing. She left. Simone stood alone in her classroom, looking out the window at Brooklyn, at the city that had raised her, challenged her, and welcomed her home. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board meeting for the Cooper Center in an hour. Don't be late, boss. Simone smiled and grabbed her bag. She'd been a teacher, a wife, a victim, a fighter, a billionaire. But most importantly, she'd been herself. And that, more than any verdict, any fortune, any revenge, was the real victory. Somewhere across town, Richard Preston sat in a small apartment, reading about Simone's latest initiative, a scholarship fund for students from underprivileged backgrounds. He smiled sadly. She'd taken his empire and built something beautiful from its ashes. She'd won in every way that mattered, and he'd lost everything by trying to keep what was never his to begin with. The irony wasn't lost on him, but it was too late now. All he could do was watch from a distance as Simone Preston, the woman he'd underestimated, used, and tried to discard, became the kind of person he'd never been. Someone who used power to lift others up, not tear them down. The end epilogue. 5 years later. The Forbes cover showed Simone Preston standing in front of the Cooper Center. The Billionaire Teacher, How Simone Preston Turned Revenge into Revolution. Inside, the article detailed her work. The Cooper Centers now existed in 12 cities. Hundreds of scientists given resources and protection, dozens of breakthrough discoveries, and Simone still taught 3 days a week. Money is just a tool, she told the interviewer. What matters is what you build with it. Richard Preston built an empire on stolen work and broken people. I'm building a future where that can't happen anymore. Do you ever regret the lawsuit, the publicity, the pain? Simone thought about this. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that James Cooper died before seeing justice. But I don't regret fighting, because some battles are worth the scars. The interviewer's final question. What would you say to someone facing their own Richard Preston? Someone who feels powerless against people with money and influence? Simone looked directly at the camera. Fight. Not because you'll definitely win, but because you'll definitely lose if you don't. And even if you lose, you'll know you didn't surrender. You didn't accept being treated as worthless. Her voice was strong, clear. You're worth more than anyone's cruelty tells you. Remember that. And never, ever stop fighting for what you deserve. The article went viral. Millions of people read it, shared it, drew strength from it. And Simone Preston, former teacher, former wife, current billionaire, current revolutionary, went back to her classroom and kept teaching. Because that's what winners do. They don't just take what's theirs. They build something better with it.